Hello, this is Piotr Parda. Welcome to my next tutorial / presentation, which I would like to call "Oh my god, he's actually going to paint something." The motif I picked is a night view of the street with a lantern and some fragment of the wall. Not too complicated because of the limited time span on YouTube. I hope it will give you enough ideas about what you can do with watercolors, and also I picked kind of a dark view because of the misconception about watercolor, which is that watercolor is generally very bland and weak in low in contrast. I wanted to show you something that proves the contrary. I'm going to use a lot of dark tones and a lot of contrast. I used some photographic reference, just more or less, to help me with basic idea, and we are ready to start. So let's select our colors. We're going to use some limited palette colors, starting with some yellows, lemon yellow and cadmium yellow. Some more information about colors you can find in my previous tutorial, the color theory in practice. We have burnt amber, which is an earth tone, and some Payne's gray, which is pretty dark gray, almost black I would say, but it has this very nice almost navy blue tint to it, and it creates very nice deep tones. And then to complete that, let's add some French ultramarine. Normally, of course, you don't have to create this kind of window. I just did that for the purpose of showing you the way I mix the colors, and a little dot of alizarin crimson here for later. So let's start. Okay, so we are ready to start. There are some rules in watercolor that are really worth obeying. One of them is start with very vague statements. Do not start with a strong statement like do not apply very dark tones at first. So some artists would do that. It's much easier if you start sort of with vague colors. Pick up your brightest spots. In this case, I'm going to choose my lantern to be the brightest, so I'm going to leave it actually 100% white. So I have to make sure that the areas that stay white will stay white, and the most important color in watercolors is the white of the paper that you actually leave untouched. So next thing to do is, because there is some fuzziness going to happen around that lamp, I'm just going to make a wash with a flat brush like this around the entire area here, just to start with a nice wet surface. Okay, so that should do, and just make sure that your water kind of gets introduced to the paper. Do not start right away, just wait a little bit. So with another kind of brush, maybe this regular watercolor brush, I'm going to start applying yellow paint around the lamp, and we're going to create a reflection of that light on the wall, which is going to be pretty bright. So what's next brightest thing to the white in our case is some of that lemon yellow, and just be careful about applying the paint. It may go sort of because whatever amount of paint you apply, it's always going to spread, and there's always stuff that happens between you apply your paint and the moment the paint dries. So make sure that you are very careful with the way you apply your paint. So I'm going to just make a wash pretty much without worrying about staying within the lines, even going on top of the windows, especially this window which I decided to leave blank. And then as the distance from the lamp increases, we can safely apply less paint, less yellow, so that later on the darker colors will complete the view. So here we can just take it easy, and even before the paint dries, we can start applying darker tones. This is burnt amber, and I will create some kind of a radius around it so that the color gradually gets darker and darker. I'm going to apply some darker tone on this side so that the light of the lamp is even more defined, and on this side it's just going to reflect itself on the wall, and maybe we need some more darker tone on this side here. And here I'm just going to make sure that this edge here is nice and fuzzy. Okay, so we are ready to apply even darker tone using our paints gray. We can mix it with some of the burnt amber, which is kind of a nice combination. So again, we can darken it around here, create a radius around that bright spot. And at this point we need more pigment as we go further away from the lamp. So there will always be imperfections and surprises. There is no way of entirely controlling the watercolor. Just make the best out of what it brings and don't be frustrated. The worst thing to do is sort of feeling like you made a mistake and coming back and apologizing to your watercolor. The watercolor hates it when you do that. So just leave it and wait for it to develop, to dry, and see what happens. So stay tuned for the next step. I'm going to pause it right now. So I'm going to apply another even darker layer around the window frames because I needed that layer to be dry in order to create sharper edges. So I'm going to come back to this dark tone here. Make sure you have a nice amount of paint, and just here around the edge of the window apply that darker tone. This layer needs to dry, so I'm going to maybe work on this side here. I decided to leave this brighter, and I've had some red paint here, which I'm going to use now to create an effect of sort of a red curtains, and having this window illuminated. There could be someone reading a book in that room. Probably not really watching TV because it's not that era. So just kind of apply that red here. Creating even more ambience. You could make it more lively by adding some cadmium yellow before even the paint dries. Makes some nice lighting effects. And now that has to dry, and meanwhile this is already pretty nice and dry. So we're going to create our window frames here. I'm just going to apply some cooler tone to differentiate that window frame from the rest. So it goes like here, and I will not worry about staying within the lines because the glass of the window is going to be pretty dark. There's nobody in the room, so it's going to be pretty dark in there. Yes, and let me straighten it better. And on this side, and that should do. And meanwhile this side is dry, so it could be a good time for us to paint a window frame. On this side, the window frame here should be a little darker so that our light inside of the room is more defined. And on this side I decided to add some yellow on this side so that we have some illusion of light reflection coming from the lamp, and little less here as it's farther from the lamp. And in the next step we're going to create some contrasts that are going to hopefully finalize our painting. So I'm going to pause for now.